We now move to the next part of the program, which is our first panel discussion. And this panel discussion will be for around 45 to 50 minutes, and 10 minutes would be for the question and answers. I request all of you to please restrict yourself with a short question to the point, and then let it not exceed that 10 minutes because we have a second panel discussion coming up. So I have pleasure in inviting the following panelists for this discussion, which is on cultural relationships as key driver for stronger trade and investment partnerships between India and the United Kingdom. We have Mr. Kosta Mavroulakis, founder and CEO, Empact Ventures, Mr. Nayan Gala, founder and managing partner, JPIN Venture Catalyst Limited, Mr. Vijay Babu Gurugubelli, he is the director, Lead Process India Private Limited, Mr. Rahul Ithape, founder of UK-India Startup Corridor. I request the panelists to be ready for the discussion, and I have pleasure in inviting Mr. Pratik Dattani, MD, EPG London, former UK head and FICCI India advisor, Bridge India, to moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much for that, and great to see so many people here today, both from India and the UK and elsewhere in Europe as well. Very warm welcome to my panelists, to Kosta, Nayan, Vijay Babu and Rahul. Great to see you all again. I think we're running just behind schedule, so as we just heard, we're going to keep it quite tight, and we'll get through some very interesting discussions over the next half an hour or so. Nayan, if I can start with you, the topic is cultural relationships as a key driver for stronger trade and investment relationships between both countries, the UK and India. Let's start with you. And what I wanted to ask is, you're one of the major players in building a corridor between the UK and India in terms of your business. What cultural differences or language barriers do you see that prevents good potential deals from startups get successfully concluded?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to be on this panel. Thank you, Pratik. Good to speak to you. So one of the things that we have observed, as being one of the major investors and building the largest corridor between the UK and India for startup investments, is that a lot of startups which are looking to grow in India, when they are looking to grow into the parts of, let's say, South India or Northern India, they do find it slightly challenging in terms of who do they approach and how do they get about going into the space and into the market. And that's where there is a bit of challenge that they have been facing for a period of time, and this is where we as investors have been coaching and advising them in terms of bringing them to our accelerator in India and supporting them to help them grow in the country, because again, India is so culturally diverse, so it is very important that they can have a strong base in a particular part of the country. They can have a hub and spoke model to grow and expand into other parts of the country. From a cultural differences perspective, again, India is a very relationship-driven model versus in the UK and Europe. The startup ecosystem is quite developed. So the two ecosystems are very different in terms of the way they operate right now, and the way the family offices and the investors operate. So there is in terms of the way we do our due diligence on startups, the data that is available generally, it's very easily available on Companies House to everywhere else in the UK, whereas when you go into India, it becomes slightly challenging. So what we're trying to do is, bringing similar kind of systems both in the UK and India, so that investors as well as entrepreneurs who are looking to do transactions between the two countries, they find it seamless in terms of doing the transactions and growing the businesses.
And what about the investors? Do the investors also are they very different in both countries in terms of what they look out for, how they engage with their startups? UK investors maybe culturally more hands-on, Indian investors less so? Can you share some insights onto that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So again, there is a lot of difference. The VC ecosystem in India is still, I would say, at a very early stage. So you can see that the family office culture is still developing, and therefore you will see a lot of new family offices and new institutional investors coming in. There are only a handful of VCs that are operating at a very high level, but other than that, there are a few angel investment networks as well. But compared to where UK is and Europe is, UK and Europe has a lot of investors who are very hands-on and would put in a lot of time and effort into helping the whole ecosystem grow and the startups grow, and are very involved in the way they are investing into the startup, not just the capital, but also time. In India, it is still developing and evolving over a period of time. But this is where, we as a business, as JPI Venture Catalyst, we come in and we facilitate the whole, investment into the startups, and we bring the startup angel investors onto the cap table as well, so that they can understand how to invest into the startups. What are the things that you should be looking for in terms of investing into startup? Because in the UK again, so a lot of these there is data protection, and then there is FCA regulation and everything else. In India, it is all getting there. There is a lot of compliance is coming into place. SEBI is coming in a big way in terms of coming in with startup policies. So a lot of good things are happening in India now. So there's a lot of cultural shift happening as well.
As you said, there's a very developed ecosystem for investing in startups in the UK and in Europe. India is one of many markets that investors here, whether they're angels or whether they're VCs, would be looking at. What is it about Indian startups that attract some of the investors here in your experience? And after this question, I'll come on to Kosta. I've got a few questions as a follow-up for him as well.
Yeah. So we have done, one of the things that we are doing as a platform is, showcasing the opportunities between cross-border, between the two countries, or between Europe and Asia as a region. And one of the things that, attracts a lot of investors in UK and Europe into India is that there is a tremendous growth opportunity. There are 620 million odd mobile users now in the country. India is one of the fastest growing unicorn land. So, if you look at the number of unicorns in India now, it's almost close to 100. And, it is one of the biggest startup ecosystem that is happening. After UK, after US and China, the number of unicorns, soon to be unicorns, is the highest in India. So there is tremendous growth that is happening in India, especially in tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 cities, where there is a massive population, as we all know. And what is happening is that a lot of the first round of startups, which were, the Olas of the world and Oyos, they have now gone through the circle of investment, large-scale investments. They have become unicorns. Their teams have been very experienced. They are now coming out, building their own startups. So the startup ecosystem is really growing very fast. And, in terms of valuations of the businesses and how much growth opportunity and potential there is, a lot of investors from UK and Europe are very attracted right now to invest into startups. And just to give you, a data point here, almost 20 plus billion was invested in last year into, into the Indian ecosystem. So there's a lot of investment that is going in the country right now for investing into startups.
20 billion in a year. Those are some pretty significant numbers. Kosta, let me come to you. To what extent do you think that technology plays a role in strengthening these cultural relationships in terms of trade and investment between the two countries?
Thanks for having me. Well, technology has always played a huge role, even prior to the pandemic, like now, and now more than ever. You know, platforms like Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, people are having video calls, they're doing pitches, they're meeting with collaborators and investors. So technology is playing a huge role already and prior to that. And at our end, for example, so at Empact Ventures, essentially we co-design technology initiatives that are on a local to a European stage, but welcoming global audiences. So prior to COVID, we co-designed about 16 of our SuperConnect series events, which are kind of like innovation pitch days, exhibitions, networking events in 9 cities across the UK. They were all focused on promoting collaboration, trade, investment between UK-based startups, scale-ups, investors, SMEs, and so on. And so with physical events, it means that you can be inclusive to those that are based in those locations or willing to travel, but it doesn't enable you to welcome a global audience into the mix. So we were running events in London, Cambridge, Manchester, Bournemouth, and others. And we were still having Indian companies like Capital QA, who have an office in Milton Keynes, but their core offices in Bangalore, Hyderabad, etc. So because they had a UK subsidiary, they were able to take part and have their teams take part and so on. But some companies that weren't able to travel, we did do some limited kind of pitching, but it's very hard to use to have a physical and run kind of a hybrid event when you're just using, let's say, a Zoom type platform. So since the pandemic, we've been able to use virtual event platforms like Hopin that have enabled us to have virtual talks, exhibitions where people can put material and investors can flick through different pitch decks, kind of speed video networking, so people can have one-to-one sessions across borders. So it's enabled us to attract thousands of people in 30 plus countries, rather than hundreds of people from across the UK. So I think technology is playing a huge role, and I think a number of private and public sector organizations are recognizing, whether it's, you know, having employees work from home on a flexible basis, or whether it's running, you know, virtual events rather than physical events.
Yeah. So technology helps you become more inclusive across different parts of the country, but also across different barriers we may have had between different countries as well. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that? How might you co-design and deliver trade and investment initiatives, not just in the UK, but between India and the UK? Can you share some light on that?
Sure. So, I mean, we co-design initiatives that include conferences and summits. So let's say we do MedTech summits with the National Institute for Health Research, Surgical MedTech Cooperative. We do, at the moment, we're in the middle of a 6-week MedTech course with the University of Southampton Institute for Life Sciences, which is about improving MedTech literacy amongst SMEs. And so every initiative we do, we always are co-curating, co-designing, co-planning with private sector organizations. So whether it's Microsoft for Startups or Hayes PLC. And what that means is we're able to tap into their networks and our networks. So that's with bringing speakers in from global audiences, bringing partners from the local to global ecosystem, whether it's investment platforms like Cedars and Angels Den that operate globally, to kind of local or regional based organizations such as the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership, or even specialist organizations like FinTech Scotland. By doing that, we then kind of curate an audience that is wide and inclusive, but comes not just from the region in which we're operating. Let's say when we're doing a physical event, we make sure that we're trying to get people from all the different cities around and regions across the UK and Ireland and Europe. So for example, right now we've just launched the second year of our European Tech for Good competition with Hayes PLC, and we've opened it up instead of just to applications from across the UK and Ireland, which we did last year. We've now opened it up to more than 30 plus countries across Europe, or companies that may be based in India, for example, but have a European subsidiary or base, and then utilizing European press at a local and regional level through to, let's say, AI press or fintech press, etc. And within all the initiatives that we do, so what makes our initiatives unique, unlike others, and I apologize for the background noise, is that we collect a lot of data at the point of registration from every attendee, every speaker, pitcher, exhibitor, etc. So this centers around what innovation they're interested in, what outcomes of collaboration, is it pilots, contracts, investments, acquisitions, partnerships, and so on, joint ventures even, and what business challenges they have. Do they have an investment challenge, or are they looking for international investment, let's say from an Indian investor that can operate through the tier 1 entrepreneur and investor visas in the UK. And based on that, we manually matchmake them. And within the event and after the event, we facilitate introductions. So during the event, we have video speed networking for the virtual events. In the physical events prior to COVID, we had it so that when people turned up, they received an email and they said, hi Sujit, these are the 10 people that you need to meet. You've told us that you're interested in AI for investment and you want to speak with investors. You really need to talk with Joe Blogs at Angels Den, etc. And then we would have a canvas of everybody's faces, so people could go and find each other. And then we would have team members that would go around and facilitate warm introductions. And now with the virtual events, obviously having virtual exhibitions through Hopin or virtual speed networking over video helps to facilitate a lot of that during the event. But now after the event, and always, we've always facilitated introductions between investors and startups, between corporates looking for innovation and startups that have that, media that are looking for stories with companies that have those stories. So that's what we mean by co-designing, yeah, a lot of our initiatives now with a virtual audience enable us to go out to I'd say on average we probably have 20 to 30 countries, attendees in 20 to 30 countries joining us, whether they're attending, pitching, exhibiting. So I think technology has really opened that up, and the connections that we do enable us to help facilitate these partnerships between India, Europe, and UK.
You mentioned you work with some LEPs, some local enterprise partnerships, and other kind of regional bodies. I wanted to follow up on something that Nayan also touched on in terms of encouraging SMEs and LEPs and other organizations in the UK to collaborate more with India, work with Indian SMEs, invest in Indian startups. How do you feel like there is an appetite to look at India, or is it really not on? For example, you said Dorset LEP. I doubt it's necessarily the #1 thing on the Dorset LEP's to-do list to look at working with Indian SMEs. But generally, what do you feel like the appetite is like, and how can that be kind of fostered and encouraged?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we work with probably 5 councils and LEPs, like BCP Council in Dorset, Dorset LEP, Enterprise M3 LEP, Southampton City Council, and others. And really, a council's role is to promote inward investment, constantly promote inward investment, or to connect its local community. And LEPs are a great source of not just focusing on the local, which a council will, but focusing regionally and trying to help businesses to expand to their region, whether it's to open an office, whether it's to recruit, whether it's to tap in for business development purposes. And our experience of working with councils and LEPs over the last 5 years has been that India in particular, for the rich heritage and the history of the partnership between the UK and India, they're always attracting these companies whether it is for the business development arm of, let's say, software development companies that for outsourcing, whether it's tapping into call centers, or whether it's bringing international investors from India to see the quality of the deal flow that is on offer in the UK, which can be very mature for the ecosystem, or even for giving an opportunity to Indian startups and scale-ups to come to the UK to raise their more mature investment round with smart investors that have networks that enable them to break into those industries within the UK. So I definitely think there is a very strong appetite. A few years ago, we actually worked with EICBI when I was its UK vice chairman, and we co-designed the India Tech Summit at the House of Parliament, and we had a number of SMEs and officials from these types of organisations that were attending to try to facilitate trade and try to identify opportunities. So yeah, does that answer the first part of your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to move away from investors in technology through to a B2C business and move on to Dr. Vijay Babu. You are the Poppadom King, from what I understand, and I want to talk to you about how did the British market initially react when you were trying to sell them the product? What are the challenges that you faced? Were they cultural challenges? Were they market access challenges? Were they regulatory and technical issues?
Dr. Vijay Babu, you're muted. Request you to please unmute. Dr. Vijay Babu, please unmute. The question has been addressed to you.
We have cases of instances just rely on their instinct and gut feeling during investments and business decisions. When we approach so they generally go by statistics and the business strategies of the company. Initially in 2011 and 12, when we approached a few British food businesses, we met with failures and dead ends. They very much rely on corporate level approvals. After a few failed attempts, then we thought of a different strategy. So why don't we approach Indian origin businesses? So in 2013, we got an opportunity to meet Mr. Rikin Lakhani. He's an Indian origin British businessman. He is the director of Pollack Snack Foods UK. Now they have merged with Europe Snacks. We met him in Mumbai, and he is there in Indian trip with his family along with kids and wife. So he taught me this secret, key secret, how to succeed UK and European business leads. When I explained him about my product quality to the excellence, he asked me how consistently you can supply the quality. So it is not the excellence in the quality or not the cheap price. It is the consistency of the quality and the transparency in business that could be achieved only by the adherence of standards and specifications. This is my first learning from the British business culture, consistency and transparency. Now, after learning this key point, after being in this business for the 8 years, and we have grown to a success of 50 crore business with one single product. Now we have around 10 and more clients in Europe and the UK. And now we have started importing technologies from UK, Europe. Example, Ireland, Poland, Netherlands, France, Italy, UK, and Switzerland. From there, we have importing the technologies to improve Indian industries. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And in terms of the British public's awareness of Indian food habits, what did you do in conjunction with the partners that you work with here to improve their knowledge about this is something that they should be buying? I'm sure there will be some early adopters, but it would have been a steep challenge at the beginning introducing it into supermarkets.
Yes, definitely the prior awareness has helped us our success. British has a good taste for Indian food and culture. Do you believe chicken tikka masala is the widely considered Britain's national dish? Indian food dish and weekly curry night dinner has a large cultural significance in UK. You can name several Indian origin families made British food business brands like Patak's Foods from Patak's family, Eastern End Foods from Hora family, Polak Snack Foods from Lakhani family. With Indian culture, values and British business standards, they have made the empire of food industries. So prior awareness is already there on Indian culture and food habits. So it is a easy go for us. So there is no need to bring UK public to this awareness. But we need to learn business culture from them. And we need to emphasize on our business cultures. Once when we approached a business deal, we carried some samples of papadums to meet one of our prospective Indian origin British businessmen. So we left the box there of product and we started discussing general things. And suddenly his British born kids came there. They asked, what is there in the box? He said, papadums were there. Immediately they grabbed it and they started munching. So then I started explaining my quality and all. He said, stop. So your product is already approved for launch. Here is my kids. They took your product and almost they have finished it. They have taken it. So let's stop business. So this is the difference between Indian origin businessmen and UK businesses. So Indian origin businessmen mostly go by their gut feeling and instinct. But when we deal with British corporates, they go by mostly by strategies and the standards and the specifications. So we have to learn how to put our traditional cultural values into their standards and specifications and portray. This is what already is there, but how to present it. That makes the difference. Now we have set up training centers. I will go with Mr. Kosta. Because of this technology and COVID restriction, virtual events through MS Team and Zooms are coming up. So we have made a partnership with British BRCGS Academy UK. And now we have coming up with different training programs, irrespective of our own exports into UK as papadums. We are bringing those standards and specifications and training into India. And in the last 1 year, we have trained around some 200 business Indian food delegates and SMEs in understanding the UK and European standard requirements for the food safety culture and business management programs.
Wonderful. You've touched on some of this already, but if you were to give your top 2 or 3 bits of advice to other Indian businesses looking to come into the UK and expand into the UK, what would you advise them?
My advice for them to understand their standards and specifications and portray our cultures into their specifications. An example, recently I had an encounter with one of my UK clients, which I advised my Indian counterparts here. So previously, my UK client was an Indian origin family-owned business. So generally, when he comes to India, he looks at our premises and our businesses. He understands it, and we delivers the orders. But now things are becoming more corporate way of handling. And suddenly, somebody called me from their office after 10 years of business with them. Suddenly today they are calling me and saying that we have to go through a particular SMETA third-party audit for your compliance to continue our business. So I said, we are already complying to it. And so many times your people came and visited this. He said, no, he looked into your system and he said, no, Indian region is designated as high risk in meeting the International Labour Organization's requirements. So better you go through this, then you'll be supplying to us. So that's a difference when you are doing with Indian business with UK. So we need to understand their specifications and requirements, changing requirements, European requirements and the UK requirements. And now I felt that the need to increase Indian representation through organizations and different bodies to UK and business cultural forums to emphasize the need to open up green channels and the policy level agreements to ease the businesses to grow between India and the UK and the European industries.
Thank you very much. So we've got 12 minutes to the end of this session. We had one other panelist that was due to join us, Rahul, but he's unfortunately unable to make it, which is good news in a way because we get to spend more time with Nayan and Kosta and Dr. Vijayababu. If you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat and I'll take them one by one. But Nayan, can I come back to you? Do you have some comments on some of the insights that Kosta shared in terms of working with LEPs and others, and also maybe some reflections on how a B2C business or a B2B2C business like Dr. Vijayababu's has succeeded and scaled in the UK?
Yeah, so absolutely. In fact, I wanted to comment on the question that you asked to Kosta. So, we as a business in India have spread out in over 50 cities now, in tier 2, tier 3 cities. And that has been one of the reasons for why we have been able to invest into so many startups. And we wanted to kind of similarly replicate the model in the UK. And we started going on to, outside of the Golden Triangle. So you have your London, Cambridge kind of and then so there's this triangle where most investments are concentrated. But then you go to places like up in Edinburgh, you go to Manchester, and you go to other parts of the UK, and there are so many networks which are very vibrant, and they are doing so much regional investments. It's incredible. But when you talk to them about investing into India, no one has an idea about what's going on in India, what is the the kind of amount of business they can do in India. So we, over last 2 years have now been talking to these hundreds of angel groups, as well as all these syndicates and others to do co-events with them, to explain to them the opportunity that is there in India, how the entrepreneurs as well as investors can look at India as an opportunity. What happens is that it's kind of a trend been going on for the last 10-20 years, is that every entrepreneur from India or from the UK, the first growth step outside their own country is to US. So everyone wants to go to US, and that is the next destination of growth as a startup. And what we are trying to get to is that hey guys, UK and Europe could be that next major destination for you as well. So from India, you do not need to go to US straight away. UK and Europe could be that major market. So come here and grow yourself here. And similarly, a lot of UK and European startups, they also are looking always towards the West to grow into US. And we are trying to educate them that, India could be a massive market. And from India, you could grow into Southeast Asian markets. You have such a large opportunity there. But then the challenge that always everyone faces is they have no idea of what to do, where to go, who to talk to. And this is where I think, we are trying to bridge that gap by coming in as an investor, so that we are just not advising them, but we are also investing into them so that they have a proper hand holding there. But yeah, to answer your question, Pratik, I think there's a lot to be done. I myself has been talking to FCDO, to many other organizations, including your previous organizations, where there are so many people who are trying to build the whole UK-India thing, but it's very difficult to navigate. There's no one who's mapped out the whole journey. And for an entrepreneur who's also trying to run the business, who's also trying to do everything else, then to also try and navigate the entire ecosystem is a nightmare. So this is where, we are trying to kind of, build that ecosystem. We have already built it in India. We're trying to build it in the UK, and then, have a true cross-border conversation.
Yeah. And I guess for businesses from India looking abroad, they will have a look at known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So in the US, they know what they don't know because they've got friends and others in their ecosystem that have gone there. Whereas with the UK and Europe, there may be a lot of unknown unknowns. They simply don't know. Brexit may have been an area of discussion and uncertainty, and certainly if Brexit happens, the size of the UK market being ring-fenced from 400 million people might therefore become smaller. So I think that's really interesting. These are definite ongoing conversations, and you're absolutely right that sometimes in some of the high-level political discussion between the two countries, between Westminster and New Delhi, I think the real opportunity that's in the regions, whether it's in the UK regions or whether it's in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in India, sometimes gets missed. So I think increasing that knowledge base and changing the unknown unknowns into the known unknowns in the regions, I think that's a really useful thing to do. Kosta, do you want to add anything onto that?
I was gonna say, I think you made some very valid points there. I mean, the UK has what I would say pockets of excellence. A lot of initiatives are very London-centric, and there's a huge volume of London-based startups and accelerators and co-working spaces. And having run events in all these local cities, you see kind of the pockets of, let's say, health tech in Cambridge, in Leeds, but at the same time, you also see other cities, let's say, like the south, like Dorset, Southampton, that already have those types of companies there, and they're trying to welcome more, to come in other places. Fintech's obviously big in London, but it is also in Leeds, and there's different gaming clusters and so on. So I definitely think that promotion of where you can go outside of London, in particular where costs are lower, the cheaper, the more you go up north, the cheaper it is, whether it's for, office space or services, etc. But finding an ecosystem to go to where there's support available, where you can pilot the technology. So London's a great place to go and raise money, for example, but then you're burning through money just to stay there, when you can actually be in a place like sorry, you can be in a place like Brighton, which is only an hour away, or Oxford, etc., which has a strong ecosystem, and you might pilot your technologies in a small place that's with working with LEPs and councils to connect into local businesses and different experts and so on. So tapping into those places where you might get a pilot that you then do over a period of time, collect data, testimonials, etc., that then leads into a contract in that city that you then take to more cities to get a wider ranging contract. I do also agree with the point that it can at times feel one-sided. You hear a lot about the UK ecosystem, and had I not been involved in the EICBI for the past 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't have learned about the great work happening in Hyderabad, in the Karnataka area, and so on. And I think more needs to be done to promote the different expertise that exist in the different cities, towns, localities, and so on, but also what they specialize in, because there are gaps in the UK ecosystem. You know, investors will tell you they probably see a lot of you know, mobile apps, a lot of AI, but really like the emerging innovation areas like agri-tech that are coming about. They don't see a lot of that. They might see some of it in places where there is a lot of farmers, let's say, there's a lot of fields and so on. They don't see that, but particularly the initiatives that maybe a lot of these councils and LEPs will run kind of agri-tech facilities, research, R&D facilities, and they're trying to find the companies to attract from outside of their areas that may or may not exist. And actually, if they actually know and are tap into and are educated on what the pockets of excellence around the whole of India are, then they can actually fill those gaps in their investment pipelines faster, and that will improve like cultural relationships for future investments as well. So yeah, that's my points on those two areas.
Thank you. So we've got 2 minutes to the end of the session. I'll leave last words to Dr. Vijay Babu, but just before that, I think both of you make some really valid points in terms of the scale of the Indian opportunity, the scale of the Indian middle class. I think that's something you can't replicate as a startup in the UK. You have to be there. India's unique in that sense across the world to have access to that kind of scale. Equally, I think networks like this, panel discussions like this are really important to be able to learn about innovation that's happening not just in your locality, but elsewhere in Europe and other parts of India. Even Lord Hanan at the beginning mentioned Devi Shetty's hospital and the kind of systemic way that cataract operations are done there. So that kind of thing, as innovative as the NHS might be in some areas, will absolutely never happen in the UK, because you cannot have British citizens going several miles away for a specialty clinic. Every hospital has to be absolutely multi-specialty, and there's that's sacrosanct in the UK. Whereas you can have innovation in India because people understand you have to go further away. So Dr. Vijay Babu, over to you for any last comments, and then we'll close the session and hand over to Mr. Janardhan.
My comment to the last is that we need to increase Indian representations at different levels of UK and the European business cultural forums. We emphasize the need for policy level agreements to ease the upcoming compliance levels of Indian business industries and manufacturers, because it can't be done on immediate basis, but we can work on some milestones, and the channels can be released from red channels to yellow channels, then let us get into the green channels. So that way we need to increase our representation for dialogues with different organizations based in UK and Europe.
Wonderful. Thank you to all my panelists for a wonderful discussion. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your insights. And over to Mr. Janardhan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pratik. I really appreciate the way you moderated the session and led Nayan as well as Kosta and Dr. Vijay Babu into the discussions. Very meaningful, insightful, and it was also trying to bring out various nuances, how business can be done in the future, and how in India, Dr. Vijay Babu especially talked about compliances. We need to be compliant with various things. There are a lot of sensitive areas in that. And when that's smoothened out, and I agree with him that, once we try to align ourselves with the British culture and the compliances there, the ease of doing business is much better. Thank you so much, the panelists, for being with us. And I'm going to open the floor for questions for just 5 minutes. You can ask questions to the panelists. The floor is open for questions. Just 5 minutes, please. Anybody wanting to ask any question to Pratik or to Nayan or to Kosta or to Dr. Vijay Babu, you're welcome to ask questions. No questions? Well, I'll give you 4 more minutes. You could also type it in the chat box if you don't want to ask vocally, orally. Yes, you can type it out if you want to. Well, I think that was a wonder.
I was just going
Yes.
to, while we're waiting for the questions to come in, right?
Yes, Nayan, go ahead. Yes.
You know, one of the other challenges that I have seen personally is also that, you know, we say about building businesses across country, cross border, but then there are a lot of other nuances around taxation and everything else, which also needs to be accounted for. So it's very, you know, easy to kind of just talk about cross border, but there are a lot of complications behind setting up businesses. So one of the things that we have realized is that, you know, when we talk about startups in India, for example, wanting to set up base in the UK, you know, there needs to be more organizations who can really help advise smaller businesses on how to structure the transaction, because if the IP is based in India, and if, you know, if the taxation is all in India, then how the investors will, you know, invest in which structures. So those kind of things, you know, the small businesses do not really understand and find it very difficult. So that's where, you know, we as a group maybe need to help out a bit more in terms of, you know, having those partners who can give those advices for, you know, these structures and everything else, so that anyone who's from the UK looking to go into India, or from India coming to UK or Europe, they have these other things in place as well.